An amazing quote by an amazing man who walked here in India, Lord Buddha. He says, all that we are is a result of what we have thought. If we think we can change, if we think we can learn those skills, and if we think we can get to the top of our profession, we can. If we think, however, no, there's nothing more to learn, I'm just going to stay as I am, then that's how you're going to stay. You cannot move on without learning, opening your mind, reflecting on what's been said, and taking yourself and driving yourself further. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. If we think bad things, we tend to become a bad person. If we think positively, we become a positive person, and we can move forward. So just bear that in mind. Bear that in mind for a second. While I tell you about another very, very important model, I want you to start in the top left-hand box, unconscious incompetent. If we look at the word incompetent, we can often get offended and say, oh, that's really harsh, but just bear with me for a minute. What we're saying here is if we don't know what we don't know, we don't actually know how to fix it. So if we're unaware of what skills are needed, there's no way we can ever develop those skills. So the first thing that has to happen, move over to the next box, is become aware that there are skills that we're lacking. When we become aware of the skills that we're lacking, we become consciously incompetent. It's like getting into a car and not knowing how to drive. You see the gears, you see these levers on the floor, you have no idea what any of it does. You don't know what you don't know, therefore you don't know how to drive the car. Somebody comes along and says, this is the ignition, this is what you press to accelerate, this is how you brake, this is how you go faster. At the end of the day, we can't do it immediately, but we become consciously incompetent. We're aware that we lack the skill. We then practice, like driving the car, we practice doing it. What happens? Over time, we become consciously competent. When we become consciously competent, at that point, a transition happens. And then, not saying that you should, but you can be driving your car, you can be talking on the mobile phone, you can be listening to music, you can do it all automatically. It becomes unconscious competence. And it's the same with any of our skills. The first thing to do is to reflect on what the leaders said were the skills that were lacking and say, actually, how good or bad am I in all of those respects? Then think about how you can get better at those skills and then actively every day start to work on those skills. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's something to think about. So think back to those skills that are needed. Let's talk about skills and let's talk about unconscious incompetence and how small things can actually make a huge difference. So here's Eastern Europe, and this is where my big tale began. I started off by living in Romania, which you can see on the map there, a place called Bucharest. Moved to Bucharest with Ernst & Young, really enjoyed working for Ernst & Young, but found that I was spending most of my time training people because they didn't understand what they were doing. I then realised I really enjoyed the training and that I'd quite like to do it full time. So I approached a listed company in the UK and I said to them, would you give me a franchise? Would you set up a company here? Would you consider me teaching for you out in Romania? They said, well, there could be a market out there, but we're not sure. So, yeah, all right. Over a period of time, they agreed to give me a franchise. So with the franchise, I was allowed to use their brand name, I was allowed to use their materials, and I did the teaching. Within 1 year, we became so successful that they actually bought us out and they set up an international division. At that time, they were totally UK-centric, and they said, go forward and open other offices in other parts of Eastern Europe. And my boss actually said to me, right, you've proved it in Romania, you can do it in Romania. Let's see you open in Poland. I'm going to give you 14 to 16 months to prove that you can open a successful business. A successful business means that you've recruited a CEO for Poland. You've also got some clients in, And you're also starting to generate some revenue. Not necessarily profitable, but I need to see that you're generating revenue. So I said, okay, fine. I was quite arrogant at the age of 26. I said, yes, of course I can do this. Got on a plane, went over to Poland, went to speak to people who didn't know the company that I worked for, didn't think that my experience in Romania was any use, didn't really rate me as a chartered accountant, felt that I was too young and Indian, and how on earth could I be the CEO of the international division of a listed company? And so it was really, really difficult. And so if I draw on this graph, success factors, so success, remember, means, trying to get in with companies and also, start to make a future, find a team, build a team. And if I think about time, my starting date was September 1998. And I had to try and make a business work by the 31st of January 2000. So I did a lot of desk research for the first couple of months. Then in December 1998, I went to Poland. I had some meetings. These meetings weren't particularly successful. And I remember sitting in my hotel room, actually crying, thinking, how on earth am I going to build this business? And at that time, on the 18th of December, I remember it well, I picked up a newspaper. It was an English language newspaper, and it had an advert in it for an event that was happening that evening. It was with the British Chamber of Commerce in Poland, and they were having like a business mixer. Now, I had a choice at that time. I could either just go to bed and cry and cry and cry, or I could force myself to go out and actually, try and make this event successful or useful for me. Now, what was I thinking that evening? What was I thinking? I was thinking all of these things. And I bet these are things that you think about every time you have to go to a networking event or any kind of event, right? I was thinking all of these things. I didn't know what I didn't know. I was unconsciously incompetent. I didn't know what could happen. All I could think about was the negatives. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. Having said that, I did decide to go. And let's look at what happened. So this is where we were. If I hadn't gone that night, I think the business wouldn't really have gone up dramatically. I would have made some contact. I would have tried to build the business, but I'm not sure I would have done enough to actually make the business successful by the 31st of January 2000. I went to this business mixer, and what happened? Well, I met 3 women at that event. I didn't think they'd know who I was or what I did, but they did know the company. They did know my former employer because they'd studied with them. And actually, it was amazing because one of them was a partner at KPMG and one of them worked up very high up in Unilever. And over time, I built up good enough relationships with them to be able to bid for business and actually win the business from them, from those 2 companies. So I had 2 good, solid clients. In addition to that, they introduced me to somebody who then became the CEO of my former company and the head of the Polish division. In addition to that, so work was going really well. I made some amazing friendships with these 3 women. I'm still really close to them. We went off on holiday together to Peru, and they helped me in other ways. They helped me find an estate agent, so I found a house. They, very bizarrely, introduced me to somebody who was doing a documentary on British Indians and British people working abroad. My friend, or one of my friends from when I was younger, happened to be watching that documentary, phoned me up, we ended up meeting up, and we ended up getting married. So all of these things can happen from a small decision that you can make. But it's not just about changing your mindset. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. It's all about making sure that you have the right tools to be able to build the business. ICAEW gave me the foundation to be able to build my business, not just that business, but also the business that I'm in at the moment, Get Through Guides. How? Because if you think about the skills that are needed, you think about what the Deepak Parekhs and Ishant Hussains and everyone else said, the big directors, what they've said are needed. They need all of these skills. They need you to be able to assimilate information, to prepare concise summaries, to structure problems, take unstructured information, structure problems, draw conclusions, make judgments, make recommendations. And what you have to ask yourself is, do you have the skills to do that job? Do you? These are decisions that have had to be made in the past. And a number of those decisions were actually made by chartered accountants. We discuss some of these on the course. But the biggest thing that you need to think about, life's changing. Doesn't your knowledge need to change too? We talk about assets getting impaired. That's a big issue on the statement of financial position or the balance sheet. But your brain is your biggest asset. How do you know that's not getting impaired? ICAI is just the beginning. You've still got the rest of your lives to go forward and to make it to the top. So you need to rise to the challenge.